Hello there. As the US under Trump quietly recalibrates its role in the Middle East, Washington is intensifying its leverage over Lebanon and Iran. In Beirut, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam is urging the US to pressure Israel to negotiate border disputes, while the US continues to pressure the government to disarm Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Iran is turning to Saudi Arabia to reopen nuclear negotiations with Washington, even as tensions rise again over IAEA inspections. What are Trump's real goals in the region at the moment? Is he abandoning isolationism in favor of a more assertive transactional policy? And how far is he willing to push to reshape regional security on Washington's terms? Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Welcome to the program. Ashok al-Awsat reported that Lebanon's army commander, General Rudolf Heikel, has postponed his planned visit to Washington amid rising American and Israeli pressure. The delay came after the United States cancelled several scheduled meetings in reaction to a Lebanese army statement accusing Israel of violating Lebanese sovereignty and destabilizing the border. Lebanese officials told Reuters that congressional criticism intensified the pressure, with lawmakers attacking Heikel for failing to curb Hezbollah and for describing Israel as the enemy. Military sources told Ashok al-Awsat that Heikel opted to postpone the trip to avoid a failed visit, noting that Israel had launched a sustained campaign accusing the Lebanese army of not doing enough to restrict Hezbollah's activity in the south, claiming the army is failing to enforce security measures along the border. Israel has demanded raids on private properties, which the army rejected without legal authorization. Despite the tensions, the Lebanese military says it's continuing implementing the ceasefire, deploying 9,000 soldiers south of the Litani and working to confiscate unauthorized weapons. Meanwhile, Iran has asked Saudi Arabia to help revive nuclear talks with the United States, Iran International reported, citing a Reuters account and regional sources. According to the report, President Masoud Pezeshkian sent a message to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stating that Iran does not seek confrontation and remains open to diplomacy if its nuclear rights are guaranteed. The letter arrived one day before the Crown Prince met President Donald Trump in Washington. While Saudi media confirmed the letter's delivery, neither Riyadh nor Tehran publicly linked it to the US trip, and Iran's foreign ministry insisted it was purely bilateral. Efforts to restart talks come months after negotiations stalled and were followed by Israeli strikes on June 13th and subsequent US attacks on key Iranian nuclear sites. Trump has since said he believes Tehran wants a deal, with the Crown Prince pledging to help facilitate an agreement. Meanwhile, the IAEA board passed a resolution urging Iran to clarify the status of its enriched uranium and damaged facilities. And tonight we are joined by two excellent guests joining us from the United States. We are joined from Washington by Dan Rennie, political researcher, and also by Ginger Chapman, who's a lawyer and political analyst. Thank you both for joining us here on Q News. Always a pleasure. Ginger Chapman, I'll start with you. So given that the Lebanese Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, is now publicly asking Washington to help draw Israel into border talks, do you think Trump has leverage in this process?
First, Mark, thank you for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and to your other guest. And what we are seeing is that President Trump appears to be trapped. One bit of information that was a revelation to the American people this week, we heard an ex-CIA official state that Israel blackmailed President Trump with the threat of nuclear weapons if Trump did not strike the Iranian nuclear facilities on behalf of Israel. This throws the American perspective into a different arena because we see that the conditions in the Middle East are becoming more volatile. Even though Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman just completed a successful visit to Washington, D.C., we know that President Trump is relying on the Crown Prince to help negotiations with Lebanon at the same time that Israeli actions in southern Lebanon are increasing the volatility of the conditions there. We know that Israel has engaged in increased airstrikes on homes and areas that they claim house Hezbollah, stores of weapons. We know that the Lebanese government is increasingly unable to make good on their promise to disarm Hezbollah because of the increased Israeli airstrikes. We know that Lebanon has filed a complaint with the United Nations because Israel has moved their border walls deeper and deeper into Lebanon. We know that now Israeli forces and their border walls are reaching 50 kilometers into Lebanon as part of Israel's goal to obtain access to the Litani River and essentially the valuable fresh water source of the Litani River. And at the same time, Washington, D.C., our envoy, Tom Barak, is pushing the Lebanese government using threats of sanctions, economic pressure, increased United Nations and international monitoring on the border at the same time that Israel has fired on United Nations peacekeeping troops there, which is not the first time. They previously fired on Scandinavian United Nations peacekeeping troops there within the past year and a half. So the conditions in Lebanon are becoming messier at the same time that everyone expects Israel to renew their attacks on Iran.
Okay.
It appears that Israel is only waiting for Trump to refocus his attention on the Middle East away from Venezuela.
Okay.
So we do see conditions are getting messier.
Okay, I want to bring Dan Rennie in then. What's your view on this? We'll stay with Lebanon for now if we can. The Lebanese PM calling on the US to press Israel into talks over these border disputes. Do you think this is something that Trump should be spending his time on and to get involved with?
Well, and again, I really agree with especially the first statement that was made here, that there is kind of almost a trap here for the president, whether it comes to domestic policy here in the United States or foreign policy. You've got people on the ground, a world away, that are angry at everything that Trump is trying to do, and then you've got people back at home, even with his own movement, his own MAGA movement, upset with him spending so much time on foreign affairs. So again, it's a tough position for any leader to be in at this point. But that said, there is an opportunity here where we can start going toward a direction of peace. And the recalibration that we're seeing about, especially how Washington is treating Lebanon, it sees, I mean, there's no other way to see it other than a strategic pivot point here and trying to find a way towards peace. And, one of the key issues here is Iran's proxies, namely the weapons and the force that Hezbollah has. And so the message that I'm seeing here from Washington to Lebanon is pretty direct. I mean, you have to answer to you can't answer to Tehran. You have to answer to Beirut. And so, if you want to have support from the United States, if you want to have international support, let's let Lebanon have a national army, not a state within a state. So we need to have this weakening of Hezbollah. And that's really the only pathway forward that I can see to a stable Lebanon and a more secure region overall, where we actually have a prospect for this peace process that is hopefully still underway, despite the setbacks that we're seeing day after day now.
And Ginger Chapman, looking at Trump and his activity over the last few months, do you think that he's becoming less isolationist, if he ever was at all?
Well, Trump.
I'll get you. I'll bring you in on the same question, Dan, in just a second. But Ginger, if you want to go first.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mark and Danny. Trump has initially started out with his campaign in the first part of his presidency, saying he would focus on domestic issues to bring prosperity at home and also focus on peace abroad. However, we have seen President Trump become further dragged into international conflicts, seemingly without the ability to reach a resolution. We see this in Ukraine. We see this with the ongoing potential for increased strikes on Iran from Israel. And we see this in Gaza. We see this in Lebanon. We see this in Syria. And essentially, this is because Trump does not appear to be in control of his foreign policy. Much of our foreign policy overseas is dictated by other countries. In Ukraine, it's the European Union that wished to use Ukraine as a battering ram against Russia to obtain Russian resources. With Israel and Iran, we see that Trump perhaps believed that we could gain control of Iran's oil resources. This was much more difficult than we thought it would be. With Venezuela, now we see that Secretary of State Rubio's desire to overthrow Cuba and Venezuela's vast oil resources are pulling the United States deeper into Venezuela. So even though Trump would like to make good on the promises to Israel for their defense, to act on the part of Israel and their aggression towards their neighbors, Trump is becoming increasingly bogged down overseas. This is also angering the American people, as your other guest mentioned. Trump's MAGA supporters are becoming increasingly angry over our increasing involvement in foreign affairs and believe Trump needs to focus on domestic and civilian social affairs at home. Our government was shut down for 43 days while Trump was focused on Israel, Gaza, Syria, Lebanon. So Trump's overseas actions are angering the American people. At the same time, he does not appear to be achieving success. His 20-point plan, we are having difficulty working out the mechanisms and the modalities that we can carry that out without angering Israel. Israel is threatening increased hostilities, increased airstrikes, and to escalate their war in Gaza if the United States does not adhere to Israeli demands for the International Stabilization Force, the transitional government. So what we see is that conditions are actually getting messier and messier as Israel's drive to take this opportunity while Trump is in office. So Netanyahu, his Knesset of hardline right-wingers, they're using Trump's presidency as their opportunity to achieve their greater Israel project goals, to achieve dominance over their neighbors in southern Lebanon, southern Syria, he cannot move forward without angering the international community, without risking global energy trade. If we move on Iran, on Syria, we risk angering Russia. We risk angering China, who will act to preserve energy flows through the Straits of Hormuz, which China relies on for their economy.
Okay.
So, and this is why Lebanon and Iran wish to engage. Specifically, Tehran would like Saudi Arabia, whom Trump loves, the Crown Prince bin Salman. They have a good relationship. So Iran is now enlisting the aid of Saudi Arabia to help work through that conflict,
Indeed.
which also implicates Lebanon and all of the other conflicts.
Okay, Dan, I said I'd bring you back in on isolationism as well. There's nothing new, is there, for a US president or indeed any world leader who's having a few problems at home to step out more onto the world stage. What's your view on Trump spending more time on international issues recently?
Absolutely, and it's really interesting that we see this very often when there's a second-term president. Oftentimes, they will spend more time on foreign policy than they do on domestic policy. It's kind of interesting to see that. And usually it's towards the end of their presidencies, not necessarily the beginning where we have this international focus. But what I think that we're seeing now is a pretty much a major recalibration of the relationships that we're seeing, not just because of the personalities of the people that are in the White House and, of Trump and Rubio and others, but it really is that there are shifting alliances. There is more leverage in the United States. I'm not talking about a U.S. heavy military intervention in any of these places, but putting that pressure on Iran's proxy network, taking out those nuclear facilities. I think what we're seeing here is an approach that is changing as these alliances are forming, specifically because there is an opportunity here to pursue peace, an opportunity that hasn't existed before. And, I know Trump makes it sound easy sometimes when he's talking and he says, oh, yeah, this war never would have started if it weren't for me. I'm going to solve it in 3 days or what have you. I think that he's learned very quickly that these conflicts, the distrust, the issues, the hatred runs very deep and it goes back a very long way. And so what he's got here is an opportunity to work towards peace. But every time we see a setback or a disruption along the way, it seems like it's undermining the whole thing. And that becomes even more work, even more engagement. So not only is he working on the big picture of things, you're working on those little details, and it becomes an almost impossible task to balance this geopolitical change that we're seeing throughout the world all at once, while at the same time, keeping the people at home happy. I mean, yeah, energy prices are down. That's fantastic. Inflation's coming down. That's fantastic. But at the same time, people want to see the leader that they elected. He ran on an America First platform. And yeah, we can make the case that, bringing peace to the world is an America First type priority, but it's not necessarily the first priority of the American people. So again, it is a difficult position for him to be in. But at the same time, I would rather that there be pursuits of peace throughout the world and minor setbacks along the way. If we're going in the right direction, then that's a win for us and it's a win for the world.
So, Ginger Chapman, let's come on to Iran then. Iran having asked Saudi Arabia to help perhaps persuade the United States to restart nuclear talks. Certainly interesting timing of that letter to Mohammed bin Salman just before he was about to meet Donald Trump at the White House. Surely not a coincidence. What does it tell you about what Iran is perceiving of Donald Trump at the moment?
Well, the tentative alliance with Iran requesting Saudi Arabia's assistance is very interesting because we do know that Israel and the United States have historically played the Gulf states against Iran as a counterweight, using the sectarian division in a divide and conquer strategy in order to gain increased power and influence in the Middle East. And with respect to one of the things your other guest, Mr. Danny, said, we do know historically when an American president focuses on foreign issues, they are unable to give full focus to domestic issues. Another aspect of this, the American people perceive that Trump's cabinet was vetted for loyalty to Israel as opposed to competence. So now we see that many members of his cabinet appear to be less competent in fulfilling their duties as far as advising President Trump on military action with respect to Pete Hegseth. We see that Secretary of State Rubio is more influenced by his affinity for Israel rather than the overall peace process, which brings us back to Iran requesting Saudi Arabia's help. Even in light of the counterweight between the Gulf states and the Shia states, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states have a vested interest, because if there is a wider regional escalation, we know that Saudi Arabia oil fields are at risk of airstrikes and bombardment if this regional conflict escalates. We do know that Qatar was bombed not once, but twice. First, they were bombed by Israel as a way to thwart negotiations with Hamas. And then Qatar was bombed a second time by Iran in a symbolic retaliatory bombing in response to Israeli actions and the airstrike that America carried out on Fordo as a result of Israeli pressure, and we now know as a result of Israeli blackmail against President Trump with their threat to use nuclear weapons. This was admitted by ex-CIA agent John Krakatow in an interview. And the other Gulf states are rightfully apprehensive at the prospect of increasing escalation. And this is because the United States, Donald Trump is putting forth more effort and working outside the box to attain peace in the Middle East. However, he is having difficulty viewed as an honest broker, because many of our initiatives appear to just solidify Israel's military control against Gaza, over southern Syria, over southern Lebanon. So Trump is making progress. He is engaging in greater negotiations with our Arab partners than previous presidents. However, as an honest broker, Trump is hindered, and his cabinet is hindered by our loyalty and willingness to act as an arm of the Israeli military. This is something that Trump needs to resolve, especially because it's damaging him politically at home and is thwarting his efforts to make peace abroad. We do see that Trump is relying to a greater extent on our Arab partners and in his negotiation efforts, and this is the most positive sign towards peace that we have seen in decades.
Okay, and Dan Renee. So on the topic of Iran, reportedly Iran's requested Saudi Arabia to mediate with Washington. Is this a sign that Iran sees an opportunity with the Trump administration? And what do you think of Ginger Chapman's point there that Trump is hindered as an honest broker because of his closeness to Israel?
So again, I think a couple of things on both those points, and I'll take the first one here about Iran. We've seen this movie before about them wanting to negotiate, about wanting to rejoin the world community. But while at the same time the centrifuges kept spinning. So it's a matter of a trust but verify style situation when it comes to Iran. Again, I do see every overture towards diplomacy as a very good thing. Because again, that's really what we need to have here. Because again, more military intervention is a loser for everyone. And when it comes to, is there leverage? Is there a closeness there? I mean, there's no question that Netanyahu has to take on a Israel first philosophy, and Trump has to take on an America first philosophy. There'll be times when the two are aligned, and there'll be times when the two diverge. I think that there has been pressure that we've seen not only from Netanyahu to Trump, but from Trump to Netanyahu to come to the table to make these peace process a possibility here. And when it comes to this foreign policy that we're talking about, I mean, every foreign policy carries risk. This is no exception. A risk of backlash in Lebanon, a risk of Iran, continuing its nuclear work, a risk of instability as the different power structures and alliances shift back and forth. But the way I see it, there's a bigger risk in doing nothing. The fact is that if we do nothing, what will we see? We'll see continued engagement on Iran with nuclear weapons. We'll see a further collapse of Lebanon as Hezbollah gets more weapons. And so if Donald Trump can put pressure on the entire region, on other world leaders, again, he's not going to be able to do it alone. No one can. He may take credit sometimes that he did, but obviously there's a team there. But this is the first time, the way I see it, that Washington has had a coherent strategy versus a reactive one. And so whether we agree or disagree with the approach, whether we disagree or agree with the leverage of the alliances, it's undeniable that there is a reshaping of the geopolitical landscape in the region. And we've got an opportunity here for peace and diplomacy versus more destruction and death. And I think that's an alternative that we can all rely on.
Now, you've both mentioned this idea about the American public wants Trump at home to be concentrating on their problems and their issues. Of course, you've just had this massive shutdown, and there are many other problems that the American public wants solving too. If Ginger Chapman, Donald Trump starts to have some success in international issues, whether it might be with Russia, whether it might be Russia, Ukraine, or Hezbollah disarming, or a deal with Iran, do you think the American public might cut him some slack on those things?
Well, Mark, you raised the excellent point that the American people see that here at home, we are unable to keep our own government open. We see that we are fighting over whether to give $9 billion in food stamps to America's poor and hungry people. We see that Americans cannot afford their health insurance. And even though inflation is going down, gas prices are going down, at the same time, electricity prices are skyrocketing. So America right now, we are seeing our own government struggle, and we are seeing our own elected leaders not paying the full attention to resolving America's problems that they need to resolve. And most notably, we learned that we sent $32 billion to Israel over the last 2 years to bomb Gaza, bomb Yemen, bomb Iran.
Okay, I'm sorry, we've only got a minute left. I just wanted to get Dan's view on the same point there. Do you think Trump's going to start having some wins, or is he doomed to failure on the international stage?
Well, what it comes down to is, I think that the pursuit of peace and the pursuit of life over destruction is always a noble pursuit. But at the same time, Trump has to make the case that what he is doing overseas is going to have that impact on the American people, and stop the dysfunction in the government, and show that the lowering of energy prices are a result of these negotiations. The lowering of tariffs and the deals that are being made in China are going to be helpful for the American people. It's going to take some time. The American people are not patient ones, but if he needs to make the case that these international efforts are going to pay dividends here at home, or otherwise he's going to be in even more trouble, not only from the Democrats, but from his own party, too.
Well, always a pleasure. Dan, Ginger, thank you so much for joining me on the program tonight. Dan Renee, political researcher, Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much indeed. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Think Tank, where we always try to unveil the complexities of our changing world. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.